Okay, so we're starting our class now. I would just also make a collaborate recording.
Recording started.
They are not as good as the YouTube recordings. The voice on collaborate to me sounds as if someone was under the water of sorts. You know, it's kind of like through a pipe of sorts. Anyway.
To the ball.
So we will start now.
It's not Mary who went to the ball, but John. Right. This hierarchic embedding of clause within
I think
clause
that I can hear one of my
great
videos,
ape is
so I
capable
better
of.
check
We think is
what
uniquely
you're
human.
hearing.
The other-
Alright. Put it down. Alright. So maybe we will start with your questions. Does anyone have a question? I think that Jen, oh my goodness, this is a question, all prepared, fantastic. I just have to now, okay, first of all, what I wanted to ask is, have you gone through all the podcasts? You will tell me, but yeah, I can't copy it. I'll just do that. Notes, no. Let's have a look what we have here. So just see whether you have seen the podcast. Okay. Yep. And Jen, I have also sent you yesterday well, for me it was yesterday, for you it was this morning, because I am in Europe now. So I have sent a reply to your attempt to do the lessons. So that was that, and we might look at it later on. I'll just see what Basma has asked and try to make sense of it. And I also remember I need to teach you another thing, how to teach poems, how to teach to read poems. Okay, so that's something that nobody touches, but you know, you're in literacy, poetry, probably belongs to English, but never mind, we'll just cover it a little bit because it's different. Okay, so in regards to my science lesson on water, I have posted on the discussion board last week. Okay, so after listening to your podcast, I had a ping moment, on how to embed aspects of language, literature, and literacy. Exactly. So I thought perhaps they can explore the word water. How else can we say it? In English we say water, in science we say this, okay, but why would they be doing this? Why would they be doing this? So that's the question. Something, you know, at the end of the day, we are teachers, so just like parents, you know, every time your child does something, you kind of, whenever you respond, you try at least to have 10 steps ahead, you know, like you don't respond by reacting. You kind of think, if I do this, this might happen later on. If I do this, this might happen later on. So you look for the smartest answer or response. So just wait, guys, I have to read. Okay. All right, well, before I actually tackle that, let me have a look at I want to find discussion board, you know, guys are just trying to scroll down to the discussion board, and my response to Jen, because it was like a structure more than going into a detail. Test your reading ideas. Okay. So just prepare. I mean, I'm asking you for a little bit of patience because I'm just trying to prepare. Sorry for the misspelling here, typo. At my age, I can barely see what I'm typing on this discussion board. It is such a funny font, and yeah. Anyway, so here we go. Mapping students' needs, right? So you go to the. So that's what I. It's not what we will teach. The question is not what I will teach. The question first is, in order for my students to engage in a project that will address the community need, these are the sort of resources I need to put in place, kind of documents, texts of this kind of variety with these kinds of languages in them and these kinds of cultural connotations, so that I can be inclusive, give them a range, allow them for critical thinking, and also so that the whole experience is transformative. That's the kind of text that is underneath this mapping students' needs. So, and that's why we use project-based learning, because project-based learning allows for all these things to be squeezed into the learning experiences that extend for a longer time. And also what they do, a project-based learning allows students to see how these different sources of information that they explore in a number of ways act on one another, so that they can actually see relationships in a richer way or deeper way. So let me now read more. So that's that. So I'm trying to expose them to different ways of thinking about a word. All right, so this time it's word, and next time you will say coal, and the next class will be about air, right? So I'm not sure. I mean, these things come from your mind or from your science thing, but something like maybe, I haven't read it yet, okay? So you can say it, not air. You don't like air? Well, this time it's not air, but maybe, next project will be on air, next project will be on coal. And what I'm saying is, yes, but let's read it first, okay? So in English we say water, in science we say H2O, in iron it is whatever it is, and it's Aboriginal symbols, yeah, wavy lines. Then it occurred to me, perhaps my students can create a visual representation of the water cycle using these different language variations. All right, so where is it going? English, layman, technical science, Aboriginal symbols. Also, we can seek help from the community to help us with more difficult representations. This ensures that ebook we produce. Where did the ebook come from, friend? Where is that coming from? This is the first time I'm hearing that we're doing an ebook, right? It's like saying, right? I don't know. It's kind of back to front. Where's the idea of an ebook coming from? So that the ebook that we produce is inclusive of most people in the community. But why ebook? For whom the ebook? What's the ebook to accomplish? And as a result, therefore, who is the audience? Because you're checking how air or how water can be represented, but we're not even sure where it actually will matter, because we're not actually sure yet to whom your students are talking. So you need to somehow integrate it in the beginning of your statement. So this ensures that the ebook we produce is inclusive of most people in the community. It doesn't have to be inclusive, it has to be impactful, right? And the reason, so it has to be impactful. And the reason why we talk about inclusivity, it's because, or inclusion, it's because inclusion allows us for a greater impact. Do you see what I'm saying? It's actually, we're not doing inclusion because we're politically correct and because we feel sorry for different people. Vietnamese, Polish people in Australia, oh, we have to stroke your head and make you feel good. It's nothing like that. It's we include different references in order to deepen the basis of the understandings in which we construct our argument. can even further extend it into using Google Translator, absolutely, to look at the words in the word cycle, blah, 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 Arabic, da, 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 da. Is this a satisfactory approach? Well, you tell me, because at this very moment, as I said, we don't know anything. We don't know the audience. We don't know where the audience lives, where they live. We don't know the purpose of all that in relation to the audience. And this is the problem that was with, I'm not sure where you looked at it, but that was the problem with little Thea's activity. Remember the reading for emotion example that I have shown? And it started with it started because I was in the house with the little person who is part of my family. And she lives in Sydney. She goes to a very prestigious school actually in Sydney, amazingly. And the teacher simply said, "Oh, just do a presentation." It didn't have any audience, didn't have any purpose, didn't have any constraints. So little Thea's response was, "Well, let's just copy and paste Wikipedia text, and I would just say it, and that will be a presentation." I mean, an intelligent response of a 21st century child. And that's a kind of thing too. We need to know the audience, where they live, who they are, why are we extending to them with our ebook, and therefore what kind of frames of reference we need to include in order for our presentation or for our ebook to have an impact. Right? So all these things you mentioned at the end actually should be put at the front. And once you know all of that, what's needed to be impactful, now you can actually do needs analysis in terms of language literacy and literacy, and what's the last one? Language literacy, and I always forget. Anyway, it's about documents, right? What text? So what language structures? Literacy is about skills, and the other one is whatever it is. It's about documents. What kinds of texts you're gonna have in order for these skills to be understood and for those structures to be included. So these kinds of statements you have to actually make at the front, so that we actually know where we're sitting. And how did you find the audience, right? Where did you get them from? How do you know that whatever you got, how did you identify the need? This is something that actually Jan got quite right, which is the need was there are tensions in in terms of how people actually approach youth and understand youth. So there are tensions. So she walked out to the community and she found out about those tensions. She found out that there is this organization that sounded like an NGO, kind of health organization that actually works to support youth with issues that they might experience. But it seemed from Jan's text that not everything is done, maybe in a way that actually represents the youth. So the question really was, can we look at any documentation that can actually shed more light on how youth is perceived and maybe how youth perceives itself, and maybe can we do something about it? That was a good context, and maybe that action we might actually engage in to do something about it could be maybe produce something for parents, because parents themselves would like to actually extend their understanding of their I dread to call it children, but there's no better word. So that was really well done, I have to say. Then I have given Jen some advice But that was really well done, and that's what I meant. We need to actually know where we are, right? So when you walk into someone's house, you know to whose house you have walked in, and what the protocol is, so you know whether to hug a person or not to hug a person, to say hello or to say, you old friend, great to see you again. Or you can be more sarcastic and say, oh my goodness, not you again, right? So if you go to Vice Chancellor's room and say, oh my goodness, not you again, you lose your position at work or status as a student. I don't know, whatever happens, right? It's not gonna be good. But if you walk into your best friend place and say, oh my goodness, it's you again here, it's gonna be welcome. So we need to know where we are, right? So that all these questions allow us to actually orient ourselves, right. So I have covered that in my podcast. I don't want to spend more time on that. Needless to say, before I read your text on the left in your chat column, I need to say that all of that, it's very good. It is really, really good, but you need to contextualize it, right? And so that you do not put students in a situation where they go through motions. Oh, see, this is water. Now check different symbols for water. Now do this. Now do that. It is not aerobic class, right? After aerobic class, you don't remember what you did and why you did. It's just, you're exhausted and you'll value this. But you don't want your students to go through this and this and this and not knowing why they're doing this and then be exhausted. What you want is them to make connections between community, themselves, and the terms of science, right? So that. I'll just have a look. Sorry, all the information is on the discussion board. Okay. Yes, I didn't look. I am not sure because I looked at your discussion board item and it was, it had like 9 responses. So I thought that maybe that was responded to by many people, maybe even myself. I can't remember anymore. I just need. Okay, well, that's great. So that's very good. I can't copy this. I'm just trying to copy this. It's very hard for me at the same time as I record. So let's have a look. So Rania, all the information is in my draft. That's great. On the discussion which I have posted last week, I have already addressed your questions of engaging the community. Blah. That's great. Okay. So I have to say, so if you if you've done it, that's fantastic. And but just have a look in detail at my response to Jen this morning, because I think that was good. And look at the recordings. About analyzing different languages, expressions of water. This is not a very good English, guys. Different expressions of water in or across different languages, analyzing a range of expressions of water or expressions of water across different languages. This just needs a why, would they? Yeah, that's exactly the thing. That's what I'm talking about, a why. I often say to my undergraduate students that, when you deal with 5-year-olds and when you make them do things, the problem is that because they love you so unconditionally, they will do whatever you tell them. Now let's do this. Now let's do this, and they will just jump. But after a while, when they start developing their own selves, they start becoming more aware of their needs in life, even if they can't articulate it. And let's do this and let's do this is no longer working. We have to make connections. We have to enable them to make connections which impact on them personally. and they know that or feel it. All right. I'll just finish reading. Perhaps you could engage them through their own culture or backgrounds, Vietnamese background, blah, blah, blah. They may speak with their grandparents about how to write words. Yeah, well, we need the bigger picture. We need who needs yet another e-book on water, right? Who needs it? And then you need to think to yourself, well, look, it's all covered in podcasts, so I can't really spend too much time because everyone else will be watching this thing and fall asleep. So just maybe really look at the videos, and I cover it quite nicely. Okay. So the strategies are good, like the ideas of different waters and so on, but because you throw those ideas, what about if they do this? What about if they do this? This, to me, signals that you are not certain whether that's a good thing. And in fact, what you should do, if you knew how to structure it, you wouldn't ask me, you would tell me, you would teach me, right? But is it okay for them to check different words of water? Well, I don't know. When you are married, is it okay to wake up in the morning at 7 o'clock? I mean, these are sort of, without context, it's really hard to provide the response. So you need to create a context, and the context itself will drive your knowledge what's right, and you will not be asking me, you will just tell me. And when you're doing this, you then know yourself that you're doing really well, right? When you get yourself into a stage where you are telling me, this is really good, this is really good, this is really good, you're right. But if you're writing with a bit of insecurity, then check. But you are the most experienced. And I just have to have a look, darling. What's this? Your most experienced has. I'm asking your advice. You're a literacy professor. Yes. Sure. So I produced my response, and that's great. Now, what is this here? No idea. Is this something you said, guys, or this is some sort of strange document that I just posted? No, this is some strange document. All right. So yeah. So I responded, and basically, that's how I say it. So I hope that. I hope that answers your. The community wants it. The community wants it. Hypothetically speaking, sure. So if you covered that, and if you say which part of the community and why they want it, and not necessarily an ebook, but maybe there's a need. There's some sort of need. Maybe there are some tensions in the community, and you might show to your students, look, there are particular texts or texts that people create in order to actually respond to or make clear to the community particular things. For example, there are websites, right? So ebook could be a website, on a website, and it's a lovely information guide for people that allows them to understand better particular things. And you can show them, or you can show them not also ebooks, show them also other texts, other ways in which people do this informative work. Because ebook is not an ebook. Ebook is already a conglomerate of different types of texts. And then someone said, okay, we can create something on the website based on these other genres, right? So that's what it is. Every genre is already an outcome of other genres, because before internet, nobody knew how to create a website. But because there was no template for the website, people just thought, okay, these are the genres, and the best, to me, someone said, when I create my website, this is the best way I can actually draw on those different genres to actually pass on my message, right? So that's why we have different types of websites, because everybody draws on other genres differently in order to present their message. So there's no template, and just as well. So what I'm saying is, when you come to the class, do not bring just websites to students because you want to train them into website. There's no such a thing. Bring different types of text, and they can, on the basis of these texts, develop and once you read those texts, take them through reading strategies, they can develop a richer understanding of the strategies for communicating messages. Okay, so I'll just have a look at Jen's that provide students with informative pieces about mental health, improving communication. Would you like me to seek such results and package them within my unit? Yes, because the idea is that if you want to inspire students to a project, the first part of teaching is to inspire them, right? And very often teachers don't know how to do it because it's called community engagement. And what they do, and it is kind of legitimate in terms of practices in schools, but not legitimate in terms of how you actually work with the community. What we do today, we're gonna do this, and people say, "Oh yeah, today we're gonna do this, great." But what I'm saying is, if you bring different texts, like I just explained for Basma, right? That's a different way where these tensions actually speak to students. It's about them that these texts are. And yes, I would like you to identify those texts, because that's what I said in the announcements. It's the detail that matters. I want you to know that if you were to actually address a particular thing, what kind of text would you draw on? Because I want to see that you know how to bring out texts that have different structures, different types of language, teach students different forms of communication, which is the literacy aspect, depending on the audience to which they speak. I'll just see here this comment. You mentioned in the feedback, I could provide that we've done that. Yes, I do. You need to identify what you will be using. I was a bit worried that providing them with resources might be a bit no, because this is like your need emerges from messages that people send to you, right? So you get messages that being sent to you, like for example, if I was a business person and I have a business and I don't know how to communicate the business, and the messages I hear, it's important to communicate my business to the community, and I'm wondering, how the heck am I going to do that? So I'm trying to understand the community. So I go into I try to find out first what's in the community. So I know that there is business council. Oh my goodness, there's a business council. There are websites. What else is there? Depending on my business, there might be other bodies. I don't know what to think about. It could be NGOs, could be all kinds of groupings of by which the community actually engages in that particular subject. And it may therefore become apparent to me that maybe if I create a website, you see, creating the website is not a following the pattern, is I can see the need. I can see the need for a website that would, as a tool, enabling me to include and expand on the detail relevant to the nature of my business. I also see that maybe my business can communicate with other businesses, so I'm just doing that too, so that other people might, and I might do this website in a way that will communicate to other businesses, just in case they might want to collaborate with me, and that expands my business, right? So you observe what's in the community and you design your text in a way that works for you. So, but you need to explore first, right? Before I create my website, or before I decide that I want to do the website, there are business cards as well. And so there are lots of things. There are lots of things happening in the society that once I explore them, meaning read them critically, I can now be in the position to decide what I can do for my business to flourish, right? To communicate its message to the community and so on. You never know what to do until you actually do the reading of what other people do. Those other people don't have to be necessarily in your business. They could be in other businesses. So you can, right? But you need to, all our action is based on our experiences. Our action is, you're pushing me into more theory, guys. But I will do that. We do not communicate. That's the sort of, communicate is a kind of word that my mother can use and my grandmother, right? We use these as sort of general. What we always respond. It doesn't matter what we do, our speech, our writing, our texts are always a response. There's this famous guy who said that. I didn't say it, friends. That guy was a contemporary of Vygotsky. They knew of each other. They both from Russia. But because Bakhtin was not Marxist, he was actually discriminated strongly against in Russia. They didn't want to approve his PhD and all of that, and I don't know, until the 50s, I think. Whereas Vygotsky was Marxist, and unfortunately he became more famous in education than Bakhtin, but Bakhtin in cultural studies is the #1 person. All right, so he was Marxist, so he did very well and so on. He was never in a prison and whatever. So anyway, Bakhtin said that all communication is just chains of responses. So when you are born into this world, you're already born into conversations. Streams of conversations that are older, but extend for millions of years. Right? Millions. We're not aware of it. We just think that our communication is just what we did today, right? Today. It's not true. One of the reasons why you know how to speak is because you've been in that stream of conversation for a number of years, and the way you act today is already a conglomerate of your reflections about how to read current context and how to respond to. See how to read current context. So that's what I mean. It will not be instructional. Before your students create something, they need to respond. So, pardon me. Let me rephrase it. When your students create something, that product is a response to a context. So what I'm saying is, if the product is a response to a context, what's the context? Give them materials so that they can read up about the context to have a better understanding what's important in that context, so that their response, be it an ebook, a website, I don't know, whatever they create, will be informed. And that's what we want. And that first phase, which is about reading all these materials, different texts that people produce, the things that you will bring in as a result of your needs analysis of your students. When they read those things and you help them with your reading strategies to read them critically, that's the time when you actually generate already transformation in them, because you expand the understandings which they bring into the context of reading. I'll just see other responses. I was hoping to have them engaged in different forms of writing through the text they produce, brochure. Yes, that's true, different forms of writing, but this course, this unit, is about reading and reading strategies. So while they engage in different forms of writing, they have, through the text they produce. Yes, but how will they know how to produce a brochure or a website? They have to, how will they know how to produce brochure and a website? Not by following someone else's template, because that's what Thea did. Thoughtlessly, she just followed Wikipedia, and that was totally inappropriate, because Wikipedia, as I said, is a factual genre. This is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. And imagine making a presentation to 11-year-olds. In the year 79 AD, blah, 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 Vesuvius, blah, blah. It was kind of very factual, very boring, in fact, until she actually started to think of emotions that each of the sections of her speech is to evoke in her friends, in her peers. What do I want? I want to surprise them. I want to, do things to them, intrigue them. I want to make them laugh. How do you make them laugh in your presentation? All of that, right? And teach them the differences so that they are informed about, right? So, yeah. So, I think we've covered that pretty nicely, Jen, already throughout the podcast and through this collaborative session. I hope you're very clear that in order for your students to produce something, would be the website or whatever, they have to, you as a teacher need to know, but whatever we produce is a response, right? Whatever we produce is a response. So to what are they responding? What pressures are you gonna create, which is the beginning, the sort of stage one of teaching? What pressures are you gonna expose them to so that they know that doing a website or a brochure or something else they decide to do is the right response? And this is how we're gonna do it on the basis of put it this way: how do you know that your students should not put a poem in the brochure? You don't know. Right? But poetry is something that is not taught as a literacy skill, which is very interesting. So we basically teach, anyway, I'm not gonna go into these political things. Perhaps instead of getting them to produce, it is important to get them to engage in reading, research, answer questions. Well, yes, absolutely. In the beginning stage, you want them to explore the problem through different texts, and that's where reading strategies go in. That research is nothing else. So how to teach to read basically means how to research your community. Right? So it's not about bringing to the classroom Cinderella, so to speak, because the early years teachers are listening to this podcast too. So it's not about showing up with Cinderella. It's for kids to actually see Cinderella as part of their research about the world in which they live. So they don't actually isolate we don't isolate a Cinderella like, oh my goodness, that's what this world is about. Is, people do things for children. What they do? Yeah, even children do things for children. In fact, just let me interrupt it because early years teachers are here. I haven't found it yet on Google. It would be very good to find it on Google. You know what would be good to find? Not children, adults, but I'm thinking that children could do. So let me just do this. Google. A book for blind children. But it is not just a book. It's a picture book for blind children. Okay, let's have a look. Oh no, nothing like that. Okay, so this is how they do it now. You see it? Like really boring? No. What I saw was in Poland. They created a picture book. Obrazkowa książka dla dzieci niewidomych. Look at that. Even if already if we look at those, what they created in Poland just recently is books for children. You might actually basically that children had a picture book, and they were blind children, so it was for blind children. So and they use the, what is it called, the alphabet, but you know, when children read with their fingers, I forgot at this very moment, it's too early in the morning in Europe. So Braille Braille alphabet. So they did that, but the pictures were colorful, and I don't remember now exactly how the colors were communicated to blind children. But one also thing was that all pictures were live. So, for example, if there was this book, for example, says 1 year in the forest. Okay, this is the title of this book, 1 year in the forest. So that if there was an animal, that the child could sense the fur of the animal. If there were trees, so there were branches in the book, real branches, so the child could actually touch them, smell them, all of that. If there was hay, that people put real hay in the book, so the pictures were not painted, they were actually stuck together from real life materials. It was very interesting, actually. So that's something that can be done, you know, children for children, creating things for children. And then if you are a little bit higher in the, I mean, I personally wouldn't mind even to have 5, 6, 7-year-olds teaching you, learning the Braille reading, because my view is the best you learn and the most you learn when you're 5, 6. By the time you get 50, it's harder, right? Maybe it isn't, but that's what people say. But you know, I wouldn't mind younger children to actually create a book like this for other children, and they could actually create it for using normal English alphabet, also using Google Translate to have other languages. But they could also create at least some text, small text in Braille alphabet, just for the fun of it, so that they can explore other ways of creating text. So if you don't have any more questions, I just wanted to do a number of things. First of all, I wanted to point to my response that I created for Jen on the discussion board, mapping students' needs that your teaching will address, right? So when you go to the community, you identify that maybe they need, you know, that there's a need in the community to better understand the management of water or understand the concept of water. So then you can think to yourself what this, you know, who said it and so on. And maybe you can think to yourself what text would help people understand better. I mean, there could be poems, there could be different stories about water from indigenous stories, maybe Chinese stories, maybe, you know, some other stories. So through different types of text, you might actually think, yeah, those different texts could actually help students or children to actually get a better understanding and communicate you know, the concept of water or water management. So now you actually, once you have this sort of kind of inkling, now you can look at the curriculum and identify the kinds of structures that you would want, that you think that allow students to better to develop literacy skills. Like I said, different types of alphabet. Before I said signaling language change, signaling also different ways in which books were produced in the past and today. That would be also a very nice way to actually give students, at least through web access, to present to them how people used to create books in the past and so on. That's very nice. So you want people to actually experience literacy as a form of engagement that actually extends over time. So websites have not been with us forever, right? We used to write on different types of papyrus and different textures and so on. So you do the needs analysis, and then you actually, when you want to inspire children to produce something for the community through those resources that you have actually mapped out and the needs of them and so on, you engage children in the process of reading, but then using those reading strategies, right? So that those reading strategies will help students to engage deeper and critically in the text they read. I think that my podcast of the last week covered those strategies relatively well. If students are creating, I just have to copy this because it's a little bit difficult to read for everybody else and maybe me too. Okay, so Basma, what happens is that you might have not listened to every lecture as yet. I'm just trying to find here. If you look through the materials, either through podcasts or through materials in Module 4, I am explaining that I am explaining a structure of unit of project-based learning, for designing project-based learning activities. And I'm saying that they have 3 stages. In order to create something, you need to respond to the need, right? So the need is here. So in order to respond to the need, you need to be exposed to the community and its text so that you can actually produce a response based on information. And in terms of literacy, it is information based on your quality reading of information in the community. So this unit is about teaching children to read, or students to read. So yes, look at this here. In stage 3, they still need to read in order to write, so they still read, but this reading here will be an extension of what they've done in stage 1. And here they will read in order to write instantly, right? So they extend so this is where they get introduced to different texts so that they actually develop an idea of what they've done and what they think the community needs, and they develop the project. Here they identify the objectives of the project and so on, and then they go on about doing the project. And you as a teacher may need to actually help them more with reading because they may need some more text than they just had here, right? So yes, they do create things, absolutely, but you cannot speak unless you learn to speak, right? So you need to hear how people, when you're little, you don't speak. You do not say, could I have my coffee this morning, please? Or would you please feed me today because I'm really hungry? You need to actually, you're crying. You're not actually asking for milk. You actually are crying. So you get exposed first to text so that your response then, which is in stage 3, is informed, right? So before we write, we need to read. We need to see how other people write. And we need to do that against a number of texts that have different structures, different types of text, and that teach students different literacy skills, right? So that they can now, when they actually go about their project, that they can actually do it in an informed way. I've covered that in more than one way. So this model, if you actually listen to the podcast from last week, I talk about it, and that's what I mean. Maybe it doesn't come across very well, but the idea is very simple. You can't speak English unless you were exposed to it. Right? You can't speak French unless you actually were exposed to it. So yes, it's important that they write, it's important that they speak, but they need exposure. And this assignment is very, very small. It only talks about 5 lessons. So what I'm saying is, either in this part or in focus either on this or on stage 1 or stage 3, either way, your job is to show to me how you will assist students in their reading, right? For the purpose of writing, absolutely. But how will you assess them in reading? Because sometimes I get assignments from students and they all talk about writing. Students will write this, students will write that, and I have to fail those assignments because there's not a single reading strategy there. Sometimes the students will say, I will read for students. So it's not even a reading strategy. It's like teacher takes over, reads for students, and then students are doing something, right? So I will be checking how you work with reading strategies, how you will support students in their reading, because that's the objective of this unit. So yes, reading for writing, but you still need to teach them to read critically. Yes, Basma, absolutely. That's what I said in my, absolutely. Exactly. Do not make it into a PhD. This is not a PhD. All I want is to see evidence that you know how to work with reading strategies. Absolutely. Have 5 lessons only on the engagement phase. I have said it a number of times. Absolutely. Is it okay to ask comprehension questions? I don't know what are comprehension questions. Comprehension is a process, right? Comprehension is a process. And if you actually listen to my podcast from last week, I addressed this. So a process of what? It's a process for you to evaluate how strongly, evaluate what you bring into the context of reading for what you bring into the context of reading. How are you gonna do that? So you need micro processes. I call them reading strategies, and you have many of them that I have taught throughout the video and throughout module 4, but especially the video, because the videos I post in the announcements are the best because they created today. LearnLine was created, say, 6 months ago, right? Because we have to produce all these things ahead of time. But those videos that I advertised, those podcasts on the announcements, were created like now, so they are most updated. So comprehension is a process, right? So it's not a word, it's a process. So what process will it be? Right? Reducing it to do you understand the words I say means nothing, right? So just what they need to do, comprehension is a process of relating yourself to your community through text. You need micro processes, many different strategies, and those strategies require research, right? So people should sit and spend time thinking or designing those processes, those micro processes. They don't do it for many reasons, but yeah, we have to design micro processes. So I have produced a number of them and put them together. So if you carefully listen to that podcast from last week, you will get a pretty good idea, right? and you don't hijack the text, right? So for example, even if we did the emotional analysis, so setting the focus, so students can identify where there is a difference, where there is the boundary between a stage of setting focus as opposed to disturbance. Allow students to actually do it themselves, where the boundary is between one stage and the next, and what emotion is it evoking in them. And one student might say, irritate me, that irritates me. Great, you don't own the student. Another student might say, well, that emotion that the setting of the focus evokes in me intrigues me. That's fine, right? Good, run with it. They can create little notes about different texts for themselves so that they can actually identify. I go into detail. What words do that? What words do that? Where else have they seen it? Where else have they seen it? Etc. I need to watch that video because I actually spent some time actually identifying questions that allow people to actually investigate why they believe that that particular emotion is being evoked in them in that particular sequence of a text, right? So just have a look at that. And it's also in the PowerPoint, but it's attached. There's a lot of myths happening in reading. As I said, they come to us throughout, from different traditions and from different centuries, and they are in books and in textbooks propagated to us by people who wrote those textbooks in the 20th century. We need to update all that stuff. Can part of your engagement phase include community visits? No. It's very funny. So what happens is as follows. First thing you do is you visit community, right? You need to be very clear. Now, so that's the thing. So you identify texts, identify then the needs against the curriculum or early years learning framework. So that's the stage one, right? Stage two is reading strategies. And part of those reading strategies, and I mentioned that in my podcast last week, may well be you bring community into the class, or the class into the community, by all means, right? But you need to know at what stage you do this and for what purpose. First, you need to meet, you need to know what you're doing, right? You need to know what's the whole thing about, and you identify the needs, you map those needs against the curriculum, and then you will see that part of the reading strategies that you will engage actually is about that, generating that interaction with the members of the community, right? By all means, but you need to know where that community visitation actually is sitting. Is it in your needs analysis or is it in the reading strategies, right? So when you have a clear understanding where they sit, then the visitation of the community is actually better, has a chance to be better designed by you and better understood by students. Yeah, what the management first to enhance students' engagement and you see words to enhance students' engagement. That means nothing. You need to be a little bit more. So in terms of the process, what does that mean? Student engagement in terms of the process, what does that mean? It means connecting them to the real world. Does it mean that? Probably. But again, in the podcast from last week, I actually addressed exactly those two words because they're very important words, but very often because they are not explained, we just talk about engagement, we just talk about connecting, but we're not explaining the exact processes underneath it. So yes, the words are very important, but please watch the last week's podcast because all of that is explained and so on. But yes, absolutely, visiting water management facility is important. But is it visiting by you in order to map the needs? Or is it both, visiting by you and then also part of the reading strategies? Now, if I see that students went to see the water management facility, I don't see it as a reading strategy. You need to integrate it in your unit of work in such a way that I can give it a tick. I don't know how to do the tick here, right? I have to give it a tick, but yes, this is a reading strategy. So yes, absolutely, visit the water management facility, but from the perspective of literacy teaching, which is, and for this assignment, which is the reading strategy, I need to see how you engage that water management facility visitation into the, as you are suggesting, maybe into the stage one of a unit of work design as a reading strategy, right? Because at the end of the day, all I might get is, first we went and visited water management facility, then we went and looked at forest, then we looked at creeks, and then we looked at what indigenous people do with water, and that's my unit of work, right? And there's not a single word here about reading. So we need to make sure that I don't get an assignment like that. And don't be surprised, I'm not actually making fun. I get assignments like that from students, right? We will do this, then we will do that, then we will that, and not a single. So very often I write to students, not one reading strategy, or sometimes I try to be helpful and I say, please identify at least one reading strategy in all this, because I want more, of course, than one reading strategy, but at least one reading strategy across your 5 lessons. And there's none. And students get very surprised. And I'm thinking, well, yes, if all I get is visitations, visit here, maybe discuss also, okay? Discuss how good they are. Well, that's not the reading strategy. None of that is reading strategy, but that's what I get very often. Students make up units of work, and they say, first we'll have a look, then we'll have a look there, then we'll think about it aloud, then we might have a discussion, we'll share views. None of that is about reading. Right? That's why it's very important to visit the community, have a clear picture in the mind of the focus, do the needs analysis against the curriculum, understand perfectly well what text you will use, what structures you want to expose students to, so that students continue developing literacy skills, and in a way that is critical, has a range, teaches them ethical disposition, all of that, right? So that at the end of the day, the whole process is impactful, not on the community only, but also on the student. We call it transformative. It changes them profoundly. Okay, let me have a look at another one. Okay, one of the things that is difficult to do is to follow the process. Right? We very often want to know the answer before we engage in the process. I suggest, Jean-Pierre, that rather than me spending time trying to answer it, why don't you just follow the process that I have outlined in my response to you on the blackboard, on the Learn line. Just follow the process. Imagine the community and the need. Imagine what you could do with the students. Do the needs analysis. what kinds of text students need in order to explore, to build their literacy experiences, and then identify reading strategies carefully, following my model that may help students read the range of texts that you will expose them to, in order for them to get inspired to take action. Right? And I am interested only in that part. Because we very often think that reading those texts, it's only just reading one text and now they can do a response. No, they have to read a number of texts, and the reading strategies are complex, and it may well take 5 lessons, 10 hours just before the students actually get into the inspiration. Just as we are talking, I'm just thinking to myself that even just that it would be very helpful if students also, I'll show you those questions. After each lesson, you might actually expose students to these questions as summarizing, as giving them orientation, or as orienting them what they've done so far, what they've learned so far, right? So after each, we could summarize, what did we discover, what did we learn, and so on. And then, as we teach them reading, we might at the end of the class add more information to each of those. So lesson 1 might result in something, lesson 2 might result in different responses, extending, lesson 3 and so on might expand. Maybe you will need only 3 lessons for reading comprehensions, and then you might actually engage students in writing. But when students write or create something, they still will want, you know that the moment you sit down to write something, you don't invent it from your head. You again go back to the text and to your reading and to the reading strategies in order to make sense of texts now directly informing your expression, right? So yes, reading strategies belong to stage 1 and they belong to stage 3. I would suggest to just limit yourself to stage 1 here. It's the safest, neatest, and you will learn a lot from it. So that when you get with students into the stage 3, where students will be now creating things, right? Then it will be easier for you. Even if you were to actually introduce more text for them and go again through the process of critical analysis, not necessarily you at the center, but maybe now because they have done so many texts in stage 1, they can actually in groups use those strategies, and then you can actually ask groups to make presentations about the text they read and the strategies they applied and how they use those strategies in their own project, lesson by lesson. So not at the end when they finish the project, but lesson by lesson they can actually report, so that you can have a chance and to not just only correct them, but also to give students opportunity to discuss and expose their engagement in the reading strategy, so that they can actually negotiate. Did you do this? Did you do that? So that they, after 10 lessons of a unit of work, they don't wake up that they actually made a mistake, but you do those checks at the end of each 2 hours. And at the end of the day, I have been teaching you this particular model and trying to trying to communicate to you how I see it. But at the end of the day, as I said, I think in my email to Jen, in my posting to Jen's, in my response to Jen's posting, what I said, I will be assessing your needs analysis, how you selected the text, were they actually complying with the general capabilities, was your activity complying with the curriculum priorities, and whether you had any reading strategies at all and how you engaged them, and whether you identified the kinds of texts and resources and tools that you would be using, right? So that's all I would be assessing. So however you integrate, so instead of us arguing, I feel like this, I feel like that, I think that's important, these discussions, and we've clarified a lot. But at the end of the day, I am interested is whether you can support students in their reading, and that's what I will be assessing. And the reason why I'm talking about mapping students' needs, because when you map students' needs against what you perceive, what you assess to be a perceived community need, if you map them, then you carefully reflect as a teacher on the text structures and literacy skills that you will be actually targeting, right? So the mapping of students' needs is not a pain that I'm asking you to go through, but it's a protection for you to ensure that when you report later on to your principal about what you taught and why you taught these things, that you have a systematic structure in relation to which you can show this is how I engaged in the curriculum, this is how I engage in the curriculum, and nobody can fight it. But if you don't have a systematic way for designing a literacy experience of your students, what will happen is you say, well, today we did just commas. Oh, today we did commas and punctuation. Or today we did focus on the nouns, right? That's not engaging the curriculum or early years learning framework. And as a result, the only thing you can, because I'm not saying to you that you will do it, but I have seen it. I'm talking about my experiences, right? So the only thing you can do is to say the curriculum is crowded. You can blame, right? And because many people have already said it, it's a fantastic excuse. But I'm not interested in excuses. I'm interested in you having a system which allows you to reflect in a systematic way about the connections you make with the curriculum, and then justify your teaching in terms of the connections you made with the curriculum. It may well save you time as a teacher, because a large part of a teacher's job nowadays is to actually report on what you did and how was it to be addressing the curriculum and its transformative objectives. It's just there. People have to do it now. I find my colleagues who are teachers in schools, 7 o'clock, if I want to meet them for coffee, I meet them for coffee in school. 7 o'clock, they're still in the school doing things, right? So it's a lot of work nowadays, a lot of administrative work. Yes, Joe Humphrey's thing is a reading support. Yes, Joe Humphrey's module is reading support. So is emotions for reading. So is intonation. Do not forget intonation. Part of being able to read is to see relationships between segments, segments of text. So main clause, subordinated clauses, or clauses that actually function as adjectives. Subordinated clause is not an adjective, and it's identified grammatically through commas, but really it's identified through the rise of intonation. So there's a break in the intonation pattern, and all of a sudden, instead of intonation falling, intonation goes back up again, right? So do remember that. And remember that in order to actually feel intonation, you can even make 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds walk around the room and feel the intonation on their bodies. And that's how they can actually learn which part of a sentence is still part of a drop of the intonation, or which bit is actually a subordinated clause and it requires commas. Do that. That's a reading strategy. So something like that is appropriate to include in our assignment, but create our own. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I call all these things that I have mentioned in the podcast are reading strategies, and they need to be there. Yeah. But I need to mention one thing, which is real fun, and I'm not sure whether it's part of the reading strategies that you will be using in schools, but I need to show it to you. Okay? I haven't done a podcast on it before, so I just want to show it to you. What if your students wanted to use in the, okay, most of the strategies that you have uploaded, blah, 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 reading strategies involving, is that intentional? Well, really, ICT, what it does, it allows you to manage your comprehension. You can click here, you can explore that. Teacher produced some sort of database, and you can compare against the database, or if a teacher has no database, maybe the teacher created a number of PowerPoints with emotional analysis, right? So it doesn't really matter whether it's ICT or not, but ICT allows you to store nicely a lot of examples as a teacher. It allows students to quickly find those examples, as opposed to, okay, let's occupy the library now and let's run and find 5,000 books with the emotional strategy of excited. I feel excited. And so setting the focus, making the reader feel excited. How are you going to find it? You can't find it. It's really hard, but the teacher can prepare different resources, and then the teacher himself or herself can find a few resources that start the same, with the same emotion, or may start with a different emotion. But do keep in mind that those emotions, you don't hijack them. You as a teacher may produce resources, you analyze them in a particular way, you think this is the emotion that this particular section in the text evokes in you, but if students say something else, let them be. Let them compare, let them go through the different questions that I produced in last week's podcast to evaluate for themselves why they identify this emotion, not another emotion, compared against other texts and so on. And they may change their mind, or they might be actually right and you might have been wrong. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that they actually learn the process, not the right answer. Some texts that we will actually want students to actually look at are poems, right? And there could be nice indigenous poems about the region. There could be our poems about the region. So even if students want to create a text, an inviting text about their region, as part of a brochure or website they produce for the say tourism office, or maybe they want to write an invitation for the aged care center, right? So in aged care center wants students or little children to produce invitations for an event. Maybe they decide to do it in the form of a poem. How cute is that? But if you expose children also to poems, as there are different poems. There are poems which win Nobel Prizes, but there are poems like little family poems, like the one that I have here, written by a 10-year-old girl from Malaysia. I feel I don't belong in this world. I just want to play and get as many friends as I can in this beautiful world. I say this once again. Okay, so I say this once again, Mommy. I say this once again. This should go actually to the bottom, right? Mommy, oh, I can't. It's a picture. Mommy, kids only want to play. So there are sweet poems, right, through which people, express their emotions, and they're not aiming to win a Nobel Prize. So how do you teach reading of the poem? Well, I don't know, but I tell you how I did that, and that revealed a lot of things in the class. I was actually teaching a postgraduate course, and I had a lot of people from different countries in Charles Darwin University. And they all gonna teach English, right? They all gonna teach English. It was so funny. So I was trying to read with them a poem. But before, so basically, what's poem? Poem is rhythm. Everything is rhythm. But there's no more rhythm than in a poem, right? That's why then when we do lyrics for a song, those lyrics are kind of a poem, right? Because there's no more rhythm anywhere in any text than in a poem. It's very visible. A poem relies on the rhythm. That's why I got here a little bit that's why I stumbled a little bit here, where mommy was put in the line above. It should be on the bottom. Mommy, kids only want to play. There needs to be a rhythm. We recognize that something is a poem where it has a rhythm, when it has a rhythm. So I thought that the rhythm is also something cultural. There's something like the meaning of the rhythm. There's a cultural aspect to it. I just have a look what I have as the next slide for this PowerPoint so that we can actually... Yes, so what I did in order for us to be on the same page with students in terms of the meaning of rhythms, I was thinking, how can I introduce them to the rhythm? There's no better way to introduce them to the rhythm than music, obviously, right? So you can see how reading poem now engages music, right? You don't have to be about grammar and nouns and adjectives and all these traditional mind-blocking terms, which remove from students all that students are, which is the hunger for creativity, hunger for being different. Because when they're little, they all want to be the same, right? There's nothing better that children can do than point to the problem. Oh, why do you speak with an accent? Why do you do this? Why do you have that thing on your face? Why are you shorter than my mother? Why are you taller than my father? You know, kids do that. But comes the age when they become teenagers and older, when they want to differentiate. They learn that being in this world is about doing different things, being different, right? And they want to actually develop characteristics that make them who they are, not what everybody else is. So they're hungry, and our job as teachers is actually support that hunger. So what I did, I found I thought to myself, how can I teach them about the rhythm and the meaning of rhythm? So what we did, we went to YouTube and we started with anthems. So I played the Australian national anthem. Right, so we all know what it sounds like. I'm not sure whether I can actually record it here. So it's a trumpet. The trumpet, did it sound to you militaristic or not? Right? Think to yourself, there is no God telling you everything what's there for sure, but people can think and compare and contrast and see whether they're right. And then this. Okay, so it goes on, and I asked students, how did it feel? How did it feel? This is before I had reading for emotions, right? This is all these sort of things that led to the method of reading for emotion. How did it feel, this, when you listen to that? So we had the Australian anthem. How did it feel? Did it feel formal? Informal? How did it feel? You know, did it make you feel grow inside when you listen to this song? Anyway, so we sort of were analyzing the moods. So, you know, anthem, that's sort of like, you know, what did it make you feel in the... So anthem, the purpose. Why are you writing the anthem? So it's a kind of has a formal beat to it. You write an anthem in the honor of what? God, in the honor of mother, in the honor of country. Can you write an anthem in the honor of friendship? I have no idea, but that's what students said. I put it on the whiteboard. I don't care. I'm not the godmother to tell you everything why we write anthem. Check on in Wikipedia or where else. Now the moods, we were checking the moods. It was very funny. We were checking, I'll tell you why. We were checking the moods of the Australian anthem, right? So, reflective. Did it feel serenity, deep? Did it feel like open, like embracing people? Oh, I don't know, I can't sing, right? Obviously. But, did it feel uplifting? All of these things. Anyway, you always need to compare and contrast. So what I thought to myself, because I come from Poland, right? I was born in Poland when Poland was communist, and that's very helpful. Because then I played to them, because I understand different systems, right? Especially European systems. So obviously I understood the communist system because I was born under the communism. So we were playing the national anthem of China. Again, trumpet. You can compare whether this trumpet sounds similar to the Australian trumpet. I felt yes, but the trumpet is always militaristic. And I don't know why we have these militaristic features in anthems, almost like you have to have an army to have a country, right? I don't know, just something. The best part of this was that I had actually 2 scholars from China in that class, and I asked them whether this was a traditional Chinese music, because, when you do things that represent your country, I wonder what kind of traditions, musical traditions you draw on to represent the spirit of the country. So I asked the people who were there, and these 2 scholars from China were there, whether that was a traditional Chinese music, and they said yes. Now, I don't know how many of you know anything about these sort of elements, but this is 100% Russian revolutionary song, right? And I know that. I speak Polish, I speak Russian, I'm part of that problem, Russia-Poland, right? Never-ending problem. And I know it's a Russian revolutionary song. And it was very interesting to say that people born in China under communism would have sworn that was traditional Chinese music. I mean, how traditional is that? Over the last how many years they had communists? That's how far back you can push it, but no further, right? It's borrowed from, but yet, okay. So we were thinking about this. How did it feel like, that kind of militaristic song? To the Australian anthem, and then we compared also. It's very fun. Then we compared with North Korean. That'd be great to compare whether it's militaristic or whether it's like the Australian one. Then we compared with the American, and then you think, well, what other country did you come up with, Ania, next? Well, I tried to confuse. This is the thing. I call it confused, but in fact you challenge. Every time you expose students to a different text, you challenge what they know about how people communicate, right? So I call it confusion just because I am whatever I am, but it's about challenging. So now what I chose, just to confuse my friends, I chose this song. Now most of you know the song. My international students that were in my group didn't know the song. I don't know how, because I went to Vietnam and actually the teachers of English in Vietnam sang this song all the time. Once I introduced it, they sang it with me and on the beach, everywhere. They knew the song backwards, right? Better than probably any Australian person does. But people that I had in my class, that they didn't know the song. And when I played it, just the song, I asked them, is it an anthem? Right? Does it feel formal? Yes. Right? So we checked the moods. We were running through the moods. You see how reading strategies? Reading poem. But in order to read poem, we were first reading moods. What mood? What rhythm? What rhythm has what mood? And therefore, what meanings do we attach to this? Does it still feel formal? Yes. Was it written in the honor of someone? Maybe. And I guess that maybe that's why this friendship popped in here. I don't know. But anyway, it pretty much had a lot of features of an anthem. And it's very interesting that when you don't know the words, and my colleagues from different countries didn't know any of these words, it was very interesting to see whether it was still, whether the feeling of the mood in that song was it still like an uplifting, bonding, embracing everyone, or was it personal, right? Now, this is really funny. That gets really funny because I don't know. I know the words, so I already am a little bit skewed or biased in terms how I read the mood of the music. But the best part of the whole analysis was that one student said it was romantic. Now, I don't know. I was first astonished. But then I thought to myself, well, why don't we just look at some romantic songs, right? Because what do I know? Maybe it is romantic, right? You can analyze with students. So one way, we listened to this song and then we picked Is this romantic? Compare with You Raise Me Up, right? What about the beats? Can you find a romantic song in English that is more like You Raise Me Up? I mean, I look, guys, I'm not into music anymore. I've gone through that phase and I'm more into neuroscience nowadays and anthropology. So I kind of became very, very sort of mono developmental. Single line developmental, but you don't have the music. You can actually come up with all these examples. You're not much older than your student, maximum 20 years, right? So you can actually, you're pretty much up to date. Come up with a maybe romantic song that is more like You Raise Me Up. Compare, contrast, and get the sense of the music, right? So when students read the poem, they can come up with the meaning of the beat of the poem. It would be very interesting now to invite someone from indigenous tribes and or nations and actually see what music, what rhythms they actually can compare and contrast and show us as different sources of different moods for students to actually understand maybe a bit of their own poems, right? So there you go. So what we did then. So I don't know. Look, it's always here's the sort of, sorry, my computer goes bananas now and then. So now and then, so basically but identifying the purpose of an anthem, the different moods, the genre, like I felt, because I am biased, right? Because I already know the words. I felt that the Chinese anthem with the trumpet was more like a call to action. I'm not sure whether the Australian anthem was also like a call to action. Pathos means it's very much what but it's not in the music. I'm not sure. You have to be a little bit more reflective and spend time in your lessons to see whether the pathos is in the Australian anthem or whether it is only in the Chinese anthem. Pathos means something like the words of Russian revolutionary songs usually tend to say things. Yesterday you were nothing, tomorrow you are everything. So yesterday you were in the depression, which is the pathos, you were nothing. Tomorrow, because we killed so many people, you are everything, because you replaced the the people who were everything before, right? So it's a kind of dragging people overnight from nothing to everything. It's a pathos. Emotional pathos means bottom and top bridged in no time, right? So it's that's kind of comparing strong emotions and dragging people through strong emotions. Yeah, so you can actually, but identifying these words is very good. You can do it also for a romantic song to compare, say, You Raise Me Up with some romantic songs. And are they really still romantic? Does really You Raise Me Up feel romantic, as some of my Cambodian students were suggesting, right? And also checking what's in ancient Chinese music, right? Whether it's really still whether it's really aligning with what the Chinese scholars have suggested, or maybe the culture has changed so much that someone who was born in a communist country would strongly believe that the Russian revolutionary song is actually their own Chinese ancient music. So anyway, these are very nice forms of analysis that you can go through. But as you go through those songs, students get into that beat, and then you can actually use reading for emotions and start creating a poem with them, right? So setting the focus, what mood? Romance. So it's gonna feel closeness. It's not about bonding, embracing everybody, but it's more individualistic. So how does it feel? What rhythm? Okay, so what emotion do you want to project? So you see how from the reading different songs and their moods, and by specifying different rhythms and different meanings for those rhythms, now we can actually experiment and start producing a little bit of a exercise poem, right? And we can the first stage is setting the focus. What emotion do we want to project? I don't know, whatever emotion, make someone angry, or make the reader feel sad for you. I feel nothing. Or surrounded by darkness, I sit here. I don't know. But, when students are more aware of the beats, of the moods, they have these things now explicitly identified in front of them. And they have been through the dance of those rhythms, because we have analyzed. It's kind of, they one step closer to generating poem, even the students who never thought they could, right? So when I was teaching Vietnamese people, I was in Vietnam, invited to do something in some spectacular program there. Literally within 3 minutes, we created a poem of 4 lines. Like, it wouldn't win any Nobel Prizes, but we were way ahead after all of this analysis than before, right before the class. So that was good. So I wanted to share it with you, that these are the sort of strategies that you can use for reading poems, whereby you actually read poem through the rhythm and then through the music, by comparing and contrasting closely and not closely related songs, so that students can identify different purposes for different genre of music, different moods that those genres generate. They can actually be exposed to those rhythms, and they feel them. Now they are feeling those rhythms in an organized way, and now you can engage them in a little exercise of producing a little poem, 4 lines together, and it's amazing what's gonna come up. And it's just a strategy to gently engage them in more creative writing, by engaging first in a creative reading of poems. And I wanted to pass it on to you, just as something that you may use, you may forget, but I wanted to share with you. Yes, and I have just explained how. Yes, so absolutely. So you can do it through this, and then you can engage. Exactly, you can engage in so you can do this rhythm reading through music. Then you can do it through reading for emotion. but then you do words, right? Then you focus on words. Then you focus on words. When you do reading for emotion of poem, then you focus on words and different strategies. Just follow the model I explained in last week's podcast. But so there are different ways. When you use reading for emotion, you focus more on words. When you do this, you focus more on the rhythm. And together, they allow students to actually feel and understand the nature of poetry better, and they can actually write it themselves. And I feel it's exciting. I mean, nothing more boring than continuously talking about nouns and adjectives. If you bring some music into the class, makes it a bit more, a bit of a multisensory, right? I'm into multisensory. So multisensory brings some diversity into the class. And kids respond to it very nicely. And therefore poetry is no longer treated as a difficult genre, but it's a fun genre. And you will have students from different culture, and you will get responses like I got, that You Raise Me Up was a romantic song. Or, you will get it. And you just have to be prepared for it and not criticize it because, what would I know about how a Cambodian romantic song feels like? Mind you, I do go to Cambodia pretty regularly. But, I don't know the culture well enough to say. But by comparing, contrasting, identifying different types of music, it's exciting and it's fun. And it's terrible because, as you are in the classroom, you sort of can't help yourself but increase the volume. In regards to the submission assignment of how would you prefer this to be set up, present plans through evidence and implications to pedagogy. Please watch my podcast 1 from last week. Podcast 1 is Introduction to Assignment 1. I explained there in detail what I expect. Okay, it's really explained pretty well, and I made it short. As I was talking, I cut that podcast and made it separate from the pedagogical podcasts, just to make sure that the rules of Assignment 1 are well explained. Okay, just look at that. I don't want to make this collaborate session last 3 hours because people are watching it and they will be just falling asleep. But do please check the podcast number 1 from last week, which is explaining the rules of assignment 1. Just use the Word document or PowerPoint document or website. How to present it, identify, you just follow the process. First, community consultation, whom you consulted, what was the outcome of it, and all, you just can imagine it. Second is mapping students' needs. I mean, it's exactly how you do it. Mapping students' needs. I need to know how you read the curriculum and how you actually what kind of mapping student needs, identifying relevant resources. So that's what mapping student needs involved, identifying relevant needs, then identifying relevant resources, identifying relevant resources that allow you to meet those needs, resources and strategies. And then next, devise 5 lesson plans, each 2 hours, for using reading strategies. And then those questions, maybe at the end of each class, maybe we will have those 5 questions, summarizing sort of. So each time we finish the class, we have those questions which are quite liked, those first ones, those here highlighted here. I think that thinking of actually summarizing each class in terms of these questions gives students a bit more guidance where they are going, and allows them to gauge how much they have learned. Because one of the things you want to do is not only you noticing that students are learning, but students themselves have to notice that they are learning too. And these are kind of integrative questions, they're summarizing questions. They allow students to self-assess in groups or together in class, maybe first time together in the class, then maybe, so you've done the reading strategies of those texts and so on to inspire them to generate a response. And after each lesson, whereby you integrate reading strategies to generate an inspiration, you might ask these questions so that students can actually gauge their own progress. And these questions belong to stage 3, whereby they plan for the project. Okay, friends? Okay, we will meet in 2 weeks now. I will give you time to process now and to organize things in your mind. And I will be on the discussion board and now just give feedback to some students. I can't give feedback to every student because I have to now do assessment of assignment 1. And in any case, I couldn't do generate feedback for every student plus assessment because it would keep me busy full-time, overtime. But yes, I will still provide feedback on assignment 2 drafts. So I will be trying to assess assignment 1 ASAP so that students get a pretty good idea where they are. Now remember, assignment 1 is worth only 40%. So if you get an even pass, it doesn't matter, because you can still get from pass to high distinction or distinction, provided you do very well on assignment 2. So do not get depressed or anxious about the grade, but just learn from the feedback. And mainly focus on assignment 2 because that's the biggest assignment. That's the most important assignment. And if you do very well on assignment 2, that's indicative of your learning in ELA 200, and I'll be certainly taking it into account when it comes to the final grade. Right? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much, and I'll meet you next in 2 weeks.